The Korean Mafia
You are
boss
mine.
husband ignored his black wife for
No one
years,
else can take
until
you from
jealousy
me.
made him wild. I never planned to marry a monster. That's what they called him behind closed doors: monster, ghost, shadow. To his face, they called him Mr. Park. I called him husband, though most days he didn't bother to answer. My name is Amara Jones. For 6 years, I was the wife of Park Ji-hoon, the man whose name made Seoul's most dangerous men bow their heads and avert their eyes. The man whose single phone call could erase a person from existence. The man who wore tailored suits to cover the dragon tattoo that wrapped around his torso, each scale representing a debt paid in blood. I loved him before I knew what he was. That was my first mistake. In the beginning, there were glimpses of humanity. Moments when his eyes would soften at the corners. When his hands, those hands that had broken bones and signed death warrants, would trace my collarbone with something like reverence. Back then, he would whisper my name in the dark like a prayer. Back then, I believed I was the exception to his cruelty. I held onto that illusion longer than I should have. As a black woman in Seoul, I was already accustomed to being the outsider. I had learned to bear the stares, to smile through the uncomfortable questions, to pretend not to notice when old women clutched their purses tighter on the subway. I had crafted armor from my dignity long before I met Ji-hoon. But being his wife, that was a different kind of isolation. At first, I thought it was protection when he insisted I use his driver. When he hired staff to maintain our penthouse. When he suggested I focus on cultural studies instead of building my translation business. It wasn't until the 3rd year of our marriage that I recognized my gilded cage for what it was. Another territory he had claimed. The wives of his associates watched me with a mixture of pity and fear. Their perfectly maintained faces never betrayed emotion, but their eyes followed me at gatherings. The black American woman who had somehow captured the untouchable Park Ji-hoon. They measured the distance between us at dinner tables, noted how he rarely touched me in public, counted how many times he looked at his phone instead of me. He is a traditional man, one wife told me, her voice soft and careful. Korean men of power are not demonstrative. Her designer bracelet clinked against her glass as she leaned closer. But at least he doesn't keep mistresses like the others. At least he gives you respect. Respect. As if silence was respect. As if absence was fidelity. As if being displayed like an exotic acquisition at business functions was honor. Ji-hoon wasn't cruel, that would have been easier. Cruelty has shape. It gives you something to fight against. No, he was indifferent in a way that felt calculated, as if marriage was another business arrangement he maintained with efficient detachment. He never raised his voice to me. He never brought his brutality home. He simply never brought himself home either. I stopped waiting up when business kept him out until dawn. Stopped asking about the blood I sometimes spotted on his shirt cuffs. Stopped wondering why certain names disappeared from conversation, why properties suddenly changed hands, why his inner circle shifted without explanation. I learned to live in the periphery of his world, watching from behind the safety glass he'd installed between us. Love doesn't die in an explosion. It erodes, steadily, silently, until one day you realize you're standing on a foundation that no longer exists. The night I understood I was alone in my marriage wasn't dramatic. No argument, no revelation, just a moment so ordinary its significance terrified me. We were at home, our penthouse overlooking the Han River. The city spread before us like a glittering circuit board. I was barefoot in our kitchen, making the spicy jollof rice my grandmother had taught me, because though we had a chef, sometimes I needed to remember who I was before Seoul, before Park Ji-hoon. He walked in, suit jacket discarded, scrolling through his phone. He glanced at the pot, then at me. "You're cooking." Not a question, not a compliment, just a flat observation. "My grandmother's recipe," I offered, a small fishing hook of conversation. He nodded once, already turning away. "I ate with the Japanese delegation." 6 words. That was all I was worth after being alone for 3 days. "Ji-hoon," I said, my voice catching. "Could we talk? About anything. Just talk." He paused, frowning slightly like I'd presented him with an invoice in the wrong currency. "About what?" And that was when I knew. Standing in our kitchen with a wooden spoon in my hand, the smell of my childhood filling a space that had never felt like home. I realized I had become a ghost in my own life. I had no answer for him. There was nothing to talk about because we shared nothing but an address. I stayed another year after that. Not because I hoped things would change, but because leaving a man like Park Ji-hoon wasn't as simple as packing bags and calling a lawyer. Men in his position didn't get divorced, they got widowed. Women who displeased them didn't walk away, they disappeared. At least, that's what I told myself as fear calcified around my heart. Fear of starting over in a country where I would always be an outsider. Fear of what he might do if I damaged his pristine image. Fear that perhaps this hollow existence was all I deserved. But dignity, once buried, has a way of clawing its way back to the surface. The catalyst came during a rare dinner where Ji-hoon actually attended. One of his captains made a joke, something crude about black women and submission. The table fell silent. All eyes turned to Ji-hoon, waiting for his reaction. Waiting to see if he would defend his wife or join the laughter. He did neither. He simply took a sip of soju and changed the subject, as if the insult had been nothing more than a draft through an open window. I sat there, smile frozen on my face, heat climbing my neck, the familiar weight of swallowed rage sitting in my throat, and something inside me, something vital and buried, finally broke free. That night, I contacted an American divorce attorney who specialized in international cases. I didn't tell her who my husband was. I didn't have to. The tremble in my voice told her everything she needed to know. I need this to be careful, I said. He's a powerful man. They all are, honey, she replied. Until they're not. It took 3 months of meticulous planning. 3 months of deleting browser histories, of speaking in code to my few remaining friends, of transferring small amounts to an overseas account, of preparing to abandon everything I couldn't carry in one suitcase. The day I left, I wore a white dress and flat shoes, practical for what might become running. I carried nothing that he had given me except the thick envelope of one I'd been saving from my allowance. No jewelry, no designer clothes, nothing that could be interpreted as theft. I left a letter on his desk in both English and Korean, though his English was flawless. I wanted no misunderstandings. Ji-hoon, I am leaving our marriage. There will be divorce papers. I ask nothing from you except freedom. I have taken nothing that wasn't mine before we met. I will tell no one about your business. I just want to go. Amara. No accusations. No emotions. The language of transaction, the only dialect he truly understood. I took a taxi to a hotel in Itaewon, where foreigners blended in, where I had paid cash for a room under a different name. I sat on the bed, hands shaking, waiting for the hammer to fall, waiting for his men to break down the door, drag me back to the penthouse, remind me that I didn't make the decisions in our relationship. My phone remained silent. No calls, no texts, no digital footprint of his reaction. 3 days later, my attorney contacted me. He's agreed to the divorce, she said, sounding surprised. No contest, no claims, no conditions except a non-disclosure agreement about his professional activities. I almost laughed. Even in divorce, Park Ji-hoon maintained his efficient detachment. He was letting me go the way one releases a bird that no longer sings, with casual disinterest. The divorce was processed with mechanical precision. His lawyers handled everything with the same cold efficiency that characterized their employer. I kept nothing but my freedom and the small savings I'd squirreled away. I declined any settlement. I wanted no threads binding me to him, no reason for him to ever think of me again. For the first time in years, I breathed without measuring each inhale. I found a small apartment in a neighborhood where few of his associates would venture. I rebuilt my translation business, specializing in helping foreign companies navigate Korean business culture, the official kind, not the shadow economy I'd glimpsed from the edges of my marriage. And slowly, carefully, I reclaimed pieces of myself. I laughed louder. I wore colors Ji-hoon had deemed impractical. I made friends who knew nothing about my past. I ate street food without worrying about appearances. I dated casually, never seriously, never deeply, never with Korean men who reminded me of sharp suits and sharper silences, until David Kim walked into my life. It happened at a business mixer I almost skipped. Old habits die hard, and part of me still flinched at rooms full of powerful men. But my newest client had insisted, and I needed the contract. Unlike the gatherings of my married life, this was legitimate business, tech entrepreneurs, foreign investors, corporate executives. No subtle undercurrent of violence. No men who disappeared to back rooms for conversations that made the air heavy. He approached with a directness that startled me, hand extended, smile reaching his eyes. "David Kim," he said in perfect English. "You must be Amara Jones. Your reputation precedes you." I shook his hand, automatically scanning for threats. "All good things, I hope. The best. You saved Gene Tech from a cultural disaster with that contract translation." His eyes, warm, without the flat calculation I'd grown accustomed to, crinkled at the corners. "They said you caught nuances even their Korean-American staff missed." For the first time in years, professional pride straightened my spine. "Language is about context as much as content," I replied. "Especially in business Korean." "I know," he said, switching to Korean so flawless it startled me. "I was born here but raised in Chicago. Came back 10 years ago to start my company. I still sometimes miss cultural cues." We talked for hours. Not the careful, performative conversations I'd endured at Ji-hoon's side, but real exchange. He asked questions and waited for answers. He laughed at my observations about expatriate life. He shared stories about straddling two cultures, belonging fully to neither. By the end of the evening, I had forgotten to be vigilant. I had forgotten to scan the room for faces I recognized from my past life. I had forgotten everything except the novel sensation of being seen, truly seen, by a Korean man who carried no shadows in his smile. When he asked for my business card, I hesitated only briefly before handing it over. When he called 2 days later to request a coffee meeting to discuss potential collaboration, I agreed with only minor trepidation. What I didn't know, couldn't have known, was that Park Ji-hoon had never truly let me go. That while he had released me from our marriage with cold efficiency, he had kept me in his peripheral vision. That his network of eyes and ears throughout Seoul had noted my new apartment, my rebuilt business, my cautious emergence into independence. And that seeing me laugh with another Korean man would wake something in him that had slept through our entire marriage. David and I moved slowly. He respected my reticence, never pushed for explanations about my past, seemed content to build something careful and deliberate. He was everything Ji-hoon was not: expressive, present, unguarded in his interest. "You carry yourself like someone who's been through war," he said one evening, months into our relationship, as we walked along the Han River. I tensed. "What does that mean?" "Your awareness. The way you always know where the exits are. How you sometimes check your phone like you're expecting bad news." His hand found mine, warm and steady. "I'm not asking you to explain. I just want you to know that whatever happened before, you're safe now." The irony of those words would haunt me later. The first sign came subtly. A client suddenly canceled our contract, offering vague excuses about restructuring. Then another. Then a third. All Korean companies with potential connections to Ji-hoon's world. Then David mentioned something odd. A business competitor asking pointed questions about his relationship with Park Ji-hoon's woman. "I told him he was mistaken," David said, frowning. "That you were my girlfriend, not anyone else's." Who is this Park person? Anyway, my blood turned to ice. "Someone from my past," I managed. "Someone best not discussed." I should have ended it then. Should have protected David from the storm I felt gathering. But selfishness, or perhaps courage, made me hold on tighter. For the first time since leaving Ji-hoon, I was building something real, something warm. I wasn't ready to surrender it to fear. The next warning was less subtle. I returned home one evening to find my apartment door unlocked. Nothing was missing, nothing disturbed, but centered on my kitchen table sat a small white box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay the jade pendant Ji-hoon had given me on our first anniversary. The only gift from him I had left behind. No note. None needed. The message was clear. "I have not forgotten what's mine." I called David immediately, voice shaking. "We need to be careful," I said. "My ex-husband." He's not someone who accepts losing. Your ex-husband left you a piece of jewelry? David sounded confused rather than frightened. He didn't understand. How could he? My ex-husband is Park Ji-hoon, I said, the name falling like a stone between us. The silence told me he recognized the name. Everyone in Seoul's business community did, even those who operated in legitimate circles. The Park Ji-hoon? He finally asked, voice carefully neutral. Yes. Another silence. I see. But he didn't see, not really. He couldn't comprehend the shadow world I had escaped, the unwritten rules that governed men like Ji-hoon, the consequences of defiance. We should go to the police, he suggested. I laughed, a harsh sound even to my own ears. The police? David, he owns half the police captains in Seoul. The other half are too afraid to move against him. Then what do we do? The question hung between us, unanswerable. What could anyone do against a man who had built his empire on knowing exactly how much pressure to apply before things broke? The confrontation, when it came, was orchestrated with the precision that characterized everything in Ji-hoon's world. A charity gala benefiting children's education. Neutral ground, public enough to discourage violence, exclusive enough to control the guest list. My client had insisted I attend to help navigate conversations with foreign donors. David accompanied me as my +1. I felt Ji-hoon's presence before I saw him. The room's energy shifted. Conversations paused fractionally. Spines straightened. Even those who didn't know exactly what he did knew enough to be wary. He stood across the room, impeccably dressed as always. A crystal tumbler of whiskey held loosely in fingers that had both caressed my skin and ordered men's deaths. His eyes found mine immediately, as if the crowd between us was inconsequential. 6 years of marriage, 1 of divorce, and this was the first time he had looked at me, truly looked, in longer than I could remember. David noticed my sudden tension. Is that him? I nodded, unable to speak past the knot in my throat. He's watching you like he's never seen you before, David murmured. He was right. Ji-hoon's gaze held none of the detached assessment I remembered. Instead, something almost like hunger sharpened his features, hunger and something darker I couldn't name. Throughout the evening, he kept his distance. No approach, no greeting, no acknowledgement beyond that initial locked gaze. But his eyes followed me as David led me to the dance floor, as we spoke with other guests, as I laughed at something whispered in my ear. It wasn't until we were preparing to leave that he finally intercepted us, stepping into our path with the fluid grace of a predator. Amara, he said, my name in his mouth for the first time in so long it felt like a violation. You look well. Up close, I could see subtle changes. New lines at the corners of his eyes. A slight hollowness to his cheeks that even perfect tailoring couldn't disguise. Ji-hoon, I replied, proud that my voice remained steady. I am well. His eyes flicked to David, dismissing him with a glance before returning to me. We should talk. Not a request. Never a request from Park Ji-hoon. We have nothing to discuss, I said. Something dangerous flickered across his face. I disagree. David shifted slightly, positioning himself between us. A gallant gesture that made my heart rate spike with fear. He didn't understand the man he was challenging. Ms. Jones has made her position clear, David said, formal but firm. Ji-hoon's expression didn't change, but the temperature around us seemed to drop several degrees. And you are David Kim, Amara's partner. The word partner hung in the air between us, its implications rippling outward like a stone dropped in still water. Ji-hoon smiled then. The cold, empty smile I had seen directed at men who later disappeared. How fortunate for her, he said softly. Then, in Korean too rapid and dialectical for David to follow, does he know where you've been? What you've seen? Who you belong to? Rage, pure and cleansing, burned through my veins. I never belonged to you, I replied in the same dialect. You never wanted me enough to claim me. His eyes widened fractionally, the closest thing to surprise I had ever witnessed on his face. That, he said, is where you're mistaken. He left without another word, the crowd parting unconsciously to let him pass, sensing the danger rolling off him in waves. David exhaled slowly once Ji-hoon was gone. What did he say to you? I shook my head. Nothing important. Just marking territory he thinks is still his. The next morning, David called in a panic. His company's primary investor had suddenly withdrawn funding. His office lease was being terminated for code violations that hadn't existed the day before. His business accounts were being audited by tax authorities. It's him, isn't it? David asked, voice tight with controlled fear. Your ex-husband. Yes? I whispered, sickness rising in my throat. It's him. How can one man do all this? It's not possible. But it was possible. For a man whose power had been built over decades, whose influence stretched into every corner of Seoul's infrastructure, nothing was impossible. Ji-hoon wasn't just destroying David's business. He was erasing him, removing his legitimacy, his security, his future, all because he had dared to stand beside me. We need to end this, I said, the words like ash in my mouth. Us, our relationship. It's the only way to stop him. No. David's response was immediate. I won't let him control your life, our lives. You don't understand what he's capable of. Then help me understand. Tell me everything. So I did. For the first time, I unlocked the vault where I had stored 6 years of observations, 6 years of half-heard conversations, 6 years of connecting dots no one had explicitly drawn for me. I told David about the businesses that served as fronts, the politicians in Ji-hoon's pocket, the rivals who disappeared, the shipments that arrived at night. When I finished, David was silent for a long moment. You lived with this knowledge for years? I lived with the weight of pretending not to know, I corrected. It was the only way to survive. That evening, Ji-hoon came to my apartment. No pretense, no warning. Just a knock that somehow conveyed authority even through solid wood. I knew who it was before I checked the peephole. Only one person knocked with that particular cadence of ownership. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. You're not welcome here. He looked different out of his usual suit. Dressed in black jeans and a gray cashmere sweater, hair slightly mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it. Almost human. Almost vulnerable. 5 minutes, he said. That's all I ask. The request itself, Ji-hoon asking rather than commanding, was so unexpected that I stepped aside. He entered my small apartment, eyes scanning everything. The modest furniture, the books stacked on coffee tables, the framed photos of my family back in Chicago. His gaze lingered on the single houseplant struggling on my windowsill. You always wanted plants in the penthouse, he said quietly. I never understood why. Because they're alive, I replied. Unlike everything else in that mausoleum. He flinched, actually flinched, at the description of what had been our home. Why are you here, Ji-hoon? To threaten me? To destroy David like you're destroying his business? Is that what you think of me? He turned, eyes darker than I remembered. That I would hurt you? You are hurting me, right now, by attacking someone I care about. He moved closer, stopping when I took an instinctive step back. Someone you care about, he repeated, voice flat. And what was I? The question, its raw simplicity, caught me off guard. You were my husband, I said finally. But I was never your wife. Not really. I was your accessory, your trophy, I don't even know what I was to you. Mine, he said, the word dropping between us like a gauntlet. You were mine. Anger, hot and clarifying, surged through me. Bullshit. Things are yours, Ji-hoon. Property is yours. I was a person you ignored for 6 years. You never once asked what I wanted, what I needed, what I dreamed about. I gave you everything. You gave me things. Security, status, a beautiful cage. My voice rose despite my determination to stay calm. But you never gave me you. You never once let me in. Do you know what it's like to sleep beside someone for 6 years and feel completely alone? He stood very still, eyes fixed on my face as if searching for something. You never said you were unhappy. A bitter laugh escaped me. I told you every day. Every time I tried to talk to you and you checked your phone. Every time I suggested a trip together and you sent me alone. Every time I dressed up for a dinner where you barely looked at me. I screamed it in 1,000 ways, Ji-hoon. You just weren't listening. Silence expanded between us, heavy with words never spoken during our marriage. And this David, he said finally. He listens. He sees me, I corrected. He doesn't look through me or past me or around me. He sees me. Something shifted in Ji-hoon's expression then. Something almost like pain. I saw you from the moment we met. And then you stopped looking. I crossed my arms, suddenly exhausted. Why are you doing this, Ji-hoon? You let me go without a fight. You didn't contest the divorce. You didn't try to stop me. Why come after me now? His jaw tightened. Because seeing you with him. He stopped, visibly struggling for control. You never smiled like that with me. Not in the last years. You never gave me reason to. He moved then, crossing the room before I could step back, close enough that I could smell the familiar sandalwood cologne that had once clung to sheets I slept in alone. I made a mistake, he said, voice low and intense. I took for granted what shouldn't have been taken for granted. I stared at him. This man who had been a stranger even while sharing my bed, now suddenly speaking a language I had yearned to hear for years. Why now? I whispered. Because someone else wants me? Because your possession is being touched by another man. His expression darkened. It's not that simple. It is that simple. You didn't want me until you couldn't have me. I stepped back, creating distance. That's not love, Ji-hoon. That's ownership. Then tell me what love is, he demanded. Tell me what I failed to give you. The request, its naked vulnerability, stunned me into momentary silence. Presence, I finally said. Interest. Curiosity about who I am beyond what I represent. The willingness to be seen at your weakest, not just your strongest. My voice caught. The courage to need someone, not just allow them to need you. He absorbed my words like physical blows, each one landing visibly. I need you now, he said simply. No, you want me now. There's a difference. I moved to the door, opening it. Please leave. For a moment I thought he might refuse, might revert to the man who commanded rather than requested. But he walked to the door, pausing only briefly beside me. This isn't finished, he said. Not a threat, but a statement of fact. After he left, I called David, hands shaking. We need to be careful, I said. Ji-hoon came to see me. Did he threaten you? Concern sharpened David's voice. Not directly, but he's not himself. He's unpredictable now, and that makes him dangerous. The next weeks unfolded like a strange dream. Ji-hoon withdrew his attacks on David's business as suddenly as he had initiated them. The investors returned. The lease violations disappeared. The tax audit concluded with an apology for the clerical error. But Ji-hoon himself remained a shadow at the edges of my life. Sometimes I would glimpse his car parked across from my building. Sometimes a package would arrive. Books I had mentioned wanting to read years ago. Recordings of jazz musicians I had once played in our penthouse while he worked in his study. Never notes, never demands, just reminders that he remembered more than I had given him credit for. David noticed my distraction. He's getting to you, he said one evening as I stared out my apartment window, checking for familiar vehicles. No, I lied. I'm just being cautious. But the truth was more complicated. Ji-hoon's sudden attention, the way he was fighting for me after years of indifference, had awakened something I thought had died. Not love, not exactly, but curiosity. Had he always cared beneath that cold exterior? Had I missed something fundamental about the man I had married? Or was this simply the response of a powerful man unaccustomed to losing what he considered his? The answer came unexpectedly, at a business conference where both David and Ji-hoon were keynote speakers. David representing legitimate tech innovation, Ji-hoon representing his public-facing investment firm. I attended as David's guest, against my better judgment. The tension in the room when both men occupied the same space was palpable. They didn't speak, didn't acknowledge each other, but awareness stretched between them like a tripwire. It wasn't until the evening reception that Ji-hoon finally approached us, glass of whiskey in hand, expression unreadable. Mr. Kim, he said formally. Your presentation was impressive. David nodded stiffly. Thank you, Mr. Park. Your investment strategies are equally noteworthy. The politeness barely masked the animosity beneath. Two alpha wolves circling, assessing. Jihoon's eyes shifted to me. Amara, you're looking well. Thank you, I replied, keeping my voice even. If you'll excuse us. Actually, he interrupted smoothly. I was hoping to speak with you. Privately. David tensed beside me. Anything you have to say to Amara can be said in front of me. Something dangerous flickered in Jihoon's eyes, a reminder of the power he wielded, the violence that lived beneath his polished exterior. It's okay, I said quickly, touching David's arm. 5 minutes. That's all. Jihoon led me to a quiet corner of the reception hall, still visible to David but beyond earshot. You're afraid of me, he said, the observation carrying a note of genuine surprise. I'm cautious, I corrected. You're not a man accustomed to hearing no. I heard it from you. When you left. His eyes held mine. I respected it. After terrorizing my boyfriend and stalking me for weeks? That's your version of respect. He had the grace to look momentarily discomfited. I reacted poorly. You reacted like exactly who you are, I said. A man who believes he controls everything in his orbit. And yet here we are, having a conversation, not an edict. He moved closer. I'm trying, Amara. To understand what I lost. To become worthy of a second chance. The words, their unexpected humility, caught me off guard. Why? I asked. Why now, when you had years to see me standing right in front of you? He was silent for a moment, conflict visible on a face that had always been a mask. Because I didn't know what emptiness was until you left, he finally said. Because watching you with him showed me everything I failed to be for you. Jihoon. Let me finish, he said, not commanding but asking. I was raised to believe that power meant control, that love was weakness, that providing was enough. His voice dropped. I never learned how to be present with another person, how to share myself beyond the surface. It seemed dangerous. It is dangerous, I said quietly. That's what makes it love and not a transaction. He nodded slowly. I understand that now. Too late, perhaps, but I understand. I studied him. This complex, damaged man who had held me at arm's length for years and now was finally reaching for me with both hands. What are you asking for? I said finally. Time, he replied. Not a reunion, not yet. Just time. Conversations. The chance to know you as you are now, not as the woman who adapted herself to fit my silence. Over his shoulder, I could see David watching us, concern etched on his face. I'm with someone else, I said. Someone who didn't need to lose me to value me. Pain flickered across Jihoon's features, genuine pain, not the calculated response of a man playing a role. I know, and if he truly makes you happy, I will step away. Permanently. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small key. But first, there's something I need you to see. The key, I realized with a start, was to our former penthouse. Tomorrow, he continued, noon. Come alone or don't come. After that, whatever you decide, I will respect it. He walked away before I could respond, leaving me holding the key like a time bomb. That night, I told David everything. About the key, the invitation, the decision I faced. You can't seriously be considering going, he said, disbelief coloring his voice. I need closure, I replied. Real closure, not just escape. He's manipulating you. This is what men like him do. They find your vulnerability and exploit it. Maybe, I conceded, but I need to know for sure. David's expression hardened. And what if it's a trap? What if he doesn't let you leave again? I almost smiled at that. Jihoon doesn't need traps. If he wanted to force me back, he has a dozen ways to do it without my cooperation. This is something else. The next day, I stood outside the penthouse door, key in hand, heart hammering against my ribs. I hadn't been here since the day I left, had deliberately avoided even this neighborhood with its luxury boutiques and exclusive restaurants. The key turned smoothly in the lock. The door opened onto what had once been my gilded cage. but the space beyond was unrecognizable. Gone was the minimalist designer furniture, the cold marble surfaces, the sterile perfection that had defined our shared home. In its place was warmth, comfortable seating, colorful art, bookshelves filled with volumes I recognized as my abandoned favorites. Plants, dozens of them, filled every windowsill, thriving in the natural light I had once complained was wasted on empty rooms. Ji-hoon stood in the center of the transformed space, hands in his pockets, vulnerability written across features that had once revealed nothing. "What is this?" I asked, stepping inside cautiously. "Home," he said simply. "Not as it was, as it should have been." I moved further in, taking in the changes. Photos I didn't recall. Candid shots of me laughing, reading, lost in thought, hung on walls that had once been deliberately bare. "You took these?" I asked, studying an image of myself on a beach in Thailand, a trip he had been too busy to join. "Yes." He moved beside me, careful to maintain distance. "I was always watching, Amara, just not in ways you could see. But you never showed me, never shared what you saw. I didn't know how." His voice dropped. Vulnerability wasn't permitted in my world. Opening myself, even to my wife, felt like creating a target. I turned to face him fully. "And now I understand what it cost me to live behind walls. What it cost us." He gestured to the transformed space. "I've dismantled many things since you left. Not just here. My businesses, my associations, the parts of my life that required me to be monstrous." I stared at him, searching for deception and finding only raw honesty. "Why would you do that?" "Because the man I was couldn't have loved you properly," he said simply. "And I want to be a man who can." Silence stretched between us, filled with everything we had never said during our marriage. "I'm not asking you to come back," he continued. "I'm not even asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to see that I heard you. Finally, too late, I heard everything you tried to tell me for years." Something broke open inside me then. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. This complex, damaged man had finally dropped his armor, exposed his heart, risked the vulnerability he had spent a lifetime avoiding. "Ji-hoon," I said softly. "I can't." "I know," he interrupted. "You've built a new life, with someone who sees your value without having to lose you first." He smiled slightly, a sad curve of lips that held no bitterness. "I respect that. I respect him for being what I failed to be." He crossed to a side table and picked up a thick envelope. "These are the last papers you'll ever have to sign regarding me. Full dissolution of any remaining financial connections. Removal of your name from old accounts you might not even know existed. Complete separation." I took the envelope, our fingers brushing briefly. "And after this?" "After this, I step back. Permanently. No more appearances, no more gifts, no more presence in your life." His eyes held mine. "Unless someday, for some reason, you want that to change." The choice crystallized then. Not between two men, but between past and future, between a love that had awakened too late and one that had recognized my worth from the beginning. "I need to go," I said finally. He nodded once. "I know." At the door, I paused, turning back to the man who had been my husband, my jailer, my greatest regret, and now, finally, a human being I could recognize. "The man who transformed this apartment," I said quietly. "The one who finally heard me. Where was he for 6 years?" Pain flickered across his face. "Learning too slowly what love actually means. What I should have given you from the beginning." I nodded, accepting the truth in his words. "Goodbye, Ji-hoon. Goodbye, Amara." I closed the door behind me, the soft click of the latch a period at the end of a long, complicated sentence. Outside, the Seoul sky stretched bright and clear above me. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in months. The choice I faced wasn't about returning to a past that had been redecorated with better intentions. It was about honoring the woman who had found the courage to walk away, to demand more, to rebuild herself from the fragments a powerful man had left behind. Ji-hoon had finally awakened to what he had lost. He had transformed himself, dismantled his walls, offered vulnerability where once there had been only cold control. But David had seen me from the beginning, had cherished what Jihoon had needed jealousy to recognize, had given freely what my husband had finally learned to offer only after losing me. Sometimes love arrives too late. Sometimes forgiveness isn't enough to rebuild what neglect has destroyed. And sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to finally, truly let go. I pulled out my phone and called David. When he answered, concern clear in his voice, I said the words that closed one chapter and opened another. I'm coming home, our home, the one we build together. Because love, real love, isn't possession or jealousy or control awakened too late. It's presence from the beginning. It's seeing someone clearly even when they can't see themselves. It's building something together, not claiming something as your own. And that was a lesson Park Ji-hoon had finally learned. At the exact moment it no longer mattered.